This is the true story of the time a tsunami of molasses destroyed Boston's North End, and how corporate greed literally weaponized pancake syrup. This is dumb history. January 15, 1919, Boston, Massachusetts. It was a lovely winter day, the kind where you might take a pleasant stroll, grab some lunch, maybe avoid being murdered by industrial-grade breakfast syrup. Unfortunately, nobody told the Purity Distilling Company that their 50-foot-tall molasses tank was having what you might call structural issues. And by structural issues, I mean it was about to unleash 2.3 million gallons of sticky death at 35 miles per hour through a crowded neighborhood. 21 people died that day, 150 were injured. All because some brilliant corporate minds thought, you know what, engineering is expensive. Let's just wing it. This is the story of how penny-pinching executives managed to weaponize pancake syrup. And somehow, their decision-making only gets worse from here. Meet the Purity Distilling Company. Because nothing says we care about quality like cutting every corner imaginable. Founded in 1915, Purity was in the business of turning molasses into industrial alcohol and rum. Pretty straightforward stuff, really. Buy molasses, store molasses, distill molasses, profit. The only problem, they needed somewhere to store 2.3 million gallons of the sticky stuff right in the heart of Boston's North End, a neighborhood packed tighter than a subway car with Italian and Irish immigrant families. So, naturally, Purity's brilliant solution was to build a massive steel tank right next to people's homes, schools, and playgrounds. Because what could possibly go wrong with storing a small lake's worth of viscous liquid 50 feet in the air above a bunch of tenement buildings? The tank was a monster, 90 feet across, 50 feet tall, and designed to hold enough molasses to fill about 4 Olympic swimming pools. It dominated the skyline like some kind of industrial Death Star, casting its shadow over the very people who had no say in whether they wanted to live next to it. But here's where it gets really good. Purity built this thing in just 4 months. 4 months. Most people take longer to renovate their kitchen. Now, you might be thinking, surely they hired a qualified engineer to design this massive container of potential death. Well, you'd be wrong. Dead wrong, as it turns out. Arthur Gell, Purity's treasurer, and the man in charge of this project had about as much engineering experience as I have in brain surgery. His brilliant cost-saving idea skipped the architect altogether. Why waste money on someone who actually knows what they're doing when you can just eyeball it? Instead of hiring professionals, Gell used plans that were basically sketched on the back of a napkin by the company that sold them the steel. It's like buying a car and letting the tire salesman design the engine. The construction was a masterpiece of good enough engineering. The steel walls were laughably thin, about half as thick as they should have been for a tank that size. But hey, thinner steel costs less money, so what could go wrong? And here's my favorite part. They decided to test their tank by filling it with water, just once, because apparently one test with a completely different liquid was enough to guarantee the safety of 2.3 million gallons of molasses. It's like testing a boat in your bathtub and declaring it ready for the Atlantic Ocean. From the moment they filled that tank with molasses, it started throwing up red flags like a communist parade. And by red flags, I mean actual molasses leaking out of every conceivable crack and seam. The locals in the North End quickly figured out they had a free molasses dispenser in their neighborhood. Kids would run up with buckets and jars to collect the sticky brown gold dripping from the tank. It became a regular neighborhood activity, like an extremely dangerous ice cream truck that never moved. But instead of thinking, maybe a tank that's constantly bleeding molasses might have some structural issues, The brilliant minds at Purity came up with an ingenious solution: paint it brown. Because if you can't see the leaks, they don't exist, right? It's like putting a Band-Aid on a severed artery. The tank didn't just leak, it groaned, it creaked, it made sounds like a dying whale. Residents complained that they could hear the thing settling and straining from blocks away. On quiet nights, the north end sounded like a haunted house, with all the metallic groaning coming from that tank. Local residents started filing complaints with the city, begging someone to do something about the obvious death trap in their backyard. The city's response? We'll look into it, which, as we all know, is government speak for we're going to ignore this until it becomes someone else's problem. January 15th, 1919. Started like any other winter day in the North End. Kids were playing in the snow, workers were heading to their jobs, and the molasses tank was doing its usual impression of a ticking time bomb that everyone had learned to ignore. But Mother Nature had other plans. The temperature that day hit an unusually warm 43 degrees, practically a heat wave for January in Boston. And here's a fun physics lesson. When molasses gets warm, it expands. When 2.3 million gallons of molasses expands inside a tank held together by wishful thinking and cost-cutting measures, well, let's just say the laws of physics are not forgiving. At exactly 12:30 p.m., the tank finally said, "I quit." The explosion sounded like a freight train colliding with a cannon factory. The entire tank split open like a ripe melon, unleashing a 25-foot-high tsunami of molasses that moved faster than most people could run. About 35 miles per hour of pure, sticky death. Buildings didn't stand a chance. The wave crushed homes like they were made of matchsticks, picked up horses and threw them around like toys, and turned Commercial Street into a river of brown devastation. People tried to run, but you can't outrun a wall of molasses moving at highway speeds. When the chaos finally settled, 21 people were dead, 150 were injured, and half the North End looked like it had been carpet-bombed by a pancake factory. The cleanup took months, and Boston Harbor stayed brown until summer. 21 people died that day because Arthur Gell thought engineering was too expensive. The cleanup cost more than proper construction would have. The lawsuits bankrupted the company, and Boston smelled like molasses for decades. Like and subscribe if you enjoy tales of magnificent stupidity on a historical scale. That's our species for you. Dependably ridiculous since the dawn of dumb history.